Okay, we can wait one more minute and then you can give the instructions, Robert, and then we could start our meeting. Just give it one more minute. Some people are
Sounds good,
signing
Andrea.
in. All right, let's go. Thank you. You can give your speech and then I'll welcome them. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sandra and Sarah. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us, everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except the committee co-chairs, Sarah and Sandra, and the presenters. Following the presentation, co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon, pressing raise hand, not the wave or the thumbs up. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're on the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Please be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs or the presenters. They will not see these chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me. I am here for support. Sarah, Sandra, back to you.
So much, Robert. Sorry, you all, for all of this noise in the background, but this is what virtual meetings have resulted to. Outside elements. So, welcome everybody to Manhattan Community Board of February Social Justice Committee meeting. I'm one of the co-chairs, and our other co-chair is the extraordinary Sarah Chu. Hi, Sarah. And thank you everybody for joining. We are extremely excited tonight to have a presentation from Jeff Hicks, who is working on innovative ways for New Yorkers and others throughout this country to obtain housing justice through technology. And then we have Satif, who is the executive director. We also have Stan Morris, who sits on the board of directors. So we're gonna have a presentation. We're gonna learn about what Justice does, how it can help us, whether you live in private housing and or public housing. We're here for you. So I'm gonna turn it over to, do you need to say anything, Sarah? Just a smile, a thumbs up, okay. I'm gonna hear your lovely voice before we end this today. So Satif, it's on you, take it away.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here at Community Board 8. I really love your logo, the way the 8 forms the 2 O's in community and board. That's really clever. So I want to talk about Just Fix today and about tenants' rights. So I know this is an issue that's important to everyone in New York City, but in particular to people who live within your community board. So let's jump right into it. I know, if I could have access to sharing my slides, I'll do so now. There we go, thank you. So I won't speak for too long, but I want to give you all an overview. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So, and can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Great. So first, let me thank Andrea and also Stan, who are our board members representing the board today. And we couldn't do what we do without the support of people like you in the community, people who care about the issues of tenants' rights and people who care about our city. So what is Just Fix? Well, first, who am I? My name is Satish Nori. I'm a lawyer. Not everyone likes lawyers, but so be it. I don't always admit it, but I'm an admitted attorney. It's a terrible joke. I worked as a tenant rights attorney for 20 years, all throughout New York City. So I worked at the Legal Aid Society and Legal Services in New York City, and I've represented tenants in their fights against their landlords in all 5 boroughs of New York City, all across Brooklyn, up and down Manhattan. For the last 9 years, I was in charge of Queens for legal aid, so I represented people all throughout Queens. And I even had a few cases in the Bronx and 1 case on Staten Island. So I've covered the entire city. And I've seen all the different issues that tenants face against their landlords in New York City. About a year ago, I joined Just Fix as executive director. And so tenants' rights and housing conditions are issues that I've fought for my entire career. And I really look forward to the new ways that I can continue to do that at Just Fix. So what's the problem? Well, there's 2 problems that the average tenant in New York City faces. One is a structural problem. So fighting for your rights as a tenant is really complicated in New York City, and it's complicated in other places too. But in New York City, there's many different types of housing. Do you live in NYCHA? Do you live in rent-stabilized housing? Do you live in market rate housing? Do you have a Section 8 subsidy? Do you live in a co-op? You know, it's really complicated to understand what your rights are, and they're determined by what type of housing you live in. Moreover, even if you know what your rights are, how do you assert those rights? So you got to go to housing court. And for anyone who's been in housing court, it's a scary, awful place to be. There aren't a lot of signs. You have to wait in line. You have to go through metal detectors. Everybody there is kind of angry and hostile and anxious. And most days you're just lucky that you don't have to be there anymore and you can leave. But if you're a tenant who's fighting for your rights, and that's the only place you can go, it's really a tough choice. It's the choice between a rock and a hard place. If you go to housing court, are you going to be able to get a lawyer? Are you going to know which rooms to go into? Is the judge going to be angry? Is immigration going to come and arrest you if you're undocumented? Will there be proper language access if you don't speak English as your first language? Is it safe to bring your family members because maybe you don't have childcare and you have to bring your kids with you? What if you're disabled? Is there enough room? Can your wheelchair fit in the elevator? Are there even elevators that work? You know, are there proper bathrooms? Is there any food to eat? Is the drinking water clean? And so on. So there's numerous issues about going to housing court that make this even harder if you're a tenant. The other problem on the other side is an informational problem. So we already talked about how many types of housing there are in New York City, and you really need to know what type of housing you live in. But there's also a lot of agencies and organizations in the landscape. So what's the difference between HPD and DOB and DHCR and OCA? And what's JIGITS? What's FEPS? What's City FEPS? What's a one-shot deal? What's HRA? It's almost an alphabet soup of acronyms and programs and organizations and agencies. And it takes years, believe me, because I went through it. It took me years to understand what everyone does and what their role is and how they relate to each other and so on. So in addition to that, it's hard to know who your actual landlord is. Is your landlord just the person or the company that works on your building? Do they own the building next door? Do they own the entire block? Do they own hundreds of buildings in the city? Are they connected to other landlords? How do they treat other tenants? Do they try to evict a lot of people? Do they maintain their buildings? Do they borrow a lot of money when they buy buildings? Do they register their buildings with the state agencies and so on? And so between the structural problems, how do you get into court? How do you assert your rights? And the informational problems, who's your landlord? What does everybody do? How does it all fit together? The average tenant has a really difficult time. And most tenants might just give up and say, I don't want to deal with this. I have a full-time job. I have kids. Maybe I'm elderly and I have health issues. I don't need another thing to worry about. I just want to live in a decent home like everybody else should. And this is not my burden to carry. So JustFix was created in 2016 to build tools to help tenants, organizers, and legal advocates address these two issues, the structural issues and the informational issues. So we use technology. And what's technology? Technology is as simple as what most of you are probably holding, which is a phone, right? That's technology. And many, many people in New York City have a phone and they have a data plan for that phone. And that's how they access a lot of the things that they use to live and to get by every single day. So we try to use that technology to deliver people tools that they can use very easily to try to fight for their rights. The other thing we do, and remember the informational gap, we try to make the information as transparent as possible so the average person can understand what they're dealing with. And so we have a search engine or a search process called Who Owns What? Wow is what we call it. And when a lot of people use it, they say, wow, this is great. So what we do is New York City has what's called open data. And so a lot of the things that people file with respect to property, with respect to buildings, that is available to the public on the city's various databases. But one of the challenges is the databases aren't connected to each other. So you might find one thing here at the DOB and a different thing at HPD and some other records at the Department of Finance where a landlord might pay their taxes, and then some other records from the court system and so on. And so what we've done is we created some software to tie all of that together. So when you type the name of the landlord, and you can try this right now if you want, but we'll go through a demo later, type your address or the name of your landlord, and within seconds, we will pull up for you everything that the city has on that entity and entities that might be connected to that entity. So immediately you'll be able to see whether your landlord has a lot of violations, whether they own a lot of properties, whether they evict a lot of people, or last year, whether they filed a lot of eviction cases. And already that's really important information because you get to see what your adversary is really like. Are they a mom and pop? Is it really just a little old lady who lives in apartment 1C? Or is it a giant corporation which has billions of dollars and they have no excuse to not fix your heat in the middle of winter? And so JustFix uses these two tools, and we're building many, many others to try to empower tenants before they go to court, before they can get a lawyer, before they talk to an organizer. Maybe they want to find out how they can act on their own behalf or on behalf of their family right away from their home and get the ball rolling, understand their rights, connect with organizers, connect with fellow tenants, and really take back housing court perhaps even, but take back the agencies and the city and make it work for everyday tenants. So the first place to start is this law case. It's called Javins versus First National Realty Corp. And it's actually not a case from New York City. It's from Washington, DC. And it's from 1970, so even before I was born. And what this case says is that landlords might have a right to collect rent under their leases, but tenants have the right to what's called the warranty of habitability. And every single lease has that warranty of habitability written into it, whether it's there or not, it's implied. And that's a big deal because that means whether or not a tenant pays the rent, and whether or not the lease says the landlord's responsible for the repairs, every tenant is entitled to repairs. And so this was later adopted all across the country and in New York. And it gives tenants the right to fight for repairs, even if they owe rent, even if there's other issues between the landlord and the tenant. Why is that? Because repairs make us all safer, right? If your neighbor's got a gas leak and the landlord won't fix it, well, you've got a gas leak too. You're in danger. And the same is true for bed bugs, for roaches, for leaks, for mold, and many other types of housing conditions. So we're all in it together, and we all have to fight for housing conditions. And this case and the subsequent laws make that true here and elsewhere. So what's happening right now in New York City? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is we have a right to counsel for tenants. And I hope you all know that. But if you're a tenant and you fit within a certain level of income and your landlord tries to evict you, you're entitled to a lawyer who should represent you for free. And before I had this job, I had that job. I represented tenants for free at Legal Aid in Queens. So that's a great thing. And it's groundbreaking because very few other places in America have such a robust right. And in New York City, there's probably 1,000 or more people who work every day for free on behalf of low-income tenants to keep them from becoming evicted. However, the downside right now for the right to counsel is that if you only need repairs, if you're not facing eviction, there's no lawyers available because they're all working on right to counsel. And so it's been harder than ever in many ways for tenants who aren't facing eviction to get a lawyer to help them address their repairs. And so in some ways, Just Fix is even more necessary than ever before because we are one of the only ways that a tenant can help address their repair issues outside of court and without struggling to get a free lawyer. So we work using focus groups and we do user research and we try to hear from everyday people who use our tools and we listen to them and we try to make our tools better as a result of those questions. So one of the things we heard is that we will risk eviction to get repairs. So many tenants will actually face eviction and fight and hold their rent to force a judge to hear about their repair issues. And that sounds very dangerous because you might get evicted if you're risking eviction, if you're facing a housing court case for eviction, you might get evicted. What if you miss a court date? What if you don't get the papers properly? But many tenants care so much about their repairs. They want to tell their story so much that they will hold their rent and force the landlord to file an eviction case against them, only to be able to address their repairs. Another thing that we learned is that people want repairs, not necessarily money damages. And you hear this in court a lot, the opposite of this, which is that the tenant just doesn't want to pay. They just want to keep the money. That's why they're saying that they have these conditions in their home. And what a lot of tenants told us is, we don't care about the money. We would pay if the apartment was properly maintained, but we want repairs. It matters. Every single condition impacts our life. And our kids can't go to sleep because it's too cold. They can't do their homework. Our elderly parents can't recover from COVID or other issues because there's mold, or again, there's no heat, or there's other conditions. So people are really motivated to get repairs, and they will fight for those repairs, even if it means that they're risking eviction. And the other thing is that people are willing to wait. This issue matters so much that they're not interested in quick fixes or short-term gains. They're willing to wait. They're willing to fight. They're willing to document their problems. They're willing to go to court over and over again. They're willing to use tools outside of the court. They're willing to band together with their neighbors. They're willing to be organized. And that's a really powerful statement, that people are willing to wait to get justice. They're willing to fight for these issues. They really matter. So let's look at the website itself. Has anyone been to justfix.org before? Okay, if you haven't, good. Well, I hope Sandrea and Stan have, because they're on our board. But here's our website. So it's actually designed to be best used on a phone. So it might look a little weird when you're looking at it on a giant screen like this, but it's a website that was built for phones. It's not an app, because if you have to download an app, you need a credit card. And many people who would need our services, they don't have a credit card. So we didn't want to exclude them. So we made it free and available through a browser on a phone. So here's our tools. The first one is called the letter of complaint. So what we allow a tenant to do is to click this. Let's start it right now. And you can start a letter and you can write in your address. We will look up your landlord and you can check off a bunch of things that you need repaired in your apartment. And then within a few minutes, there's a letter that's written by our computer and it's ready to mail. And if you hit please mail it, that letter gets mailed in the real mail, USPS, to your landlord, and it looks like it's coming from you. And that's a pretty important step because it's a way to document your conditions and notify your landlord in the same step. And it takes 15 minutes and you never have to leave your apartment to do it, as long as you've got a device with a screen. And we've studied the impact of this letter. And in more than 30% of cases, landlords make repairs just after receiving the letter. Now, what if the landlord doesn't make repairs? Well, you've got the letter as evidence for court. It's got a stamp on it and it's sent to your landlord, and you can say, they can't say they didn't know because here's the proof, and you can hold up the letter. So it serves many different purposes. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is called who owns what. So we're going to try to do a live demo here. Does anyone want to volunteer an address? Not NYCHA, but an address that exists inside New York City.
I guess I'll give my old address.
Okay, let's hear it.
26 Metropolitan Oakville. How about that? I was on the 6th floor of the apartment. 26
Metropolitan
Oval.
In the Bronx.
Yes.
Okay, so you see when you start typing, the rest of the address fills itself in. And that's something that we added to this tool, so it's easier to find an address. So you type this in, and let's see what you got here. So there's an incomplete registration for 26 Metropolitan Oval. And there's nothing here. So that example kind of failed, unfortunately. But for whatever reason, is there another one? Does anyone want to try another one?
Satish, there's the office address of 505 Park Avenue.
Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so we see a Google Street View of the building, and it's not a residential address. So you know right away this is an office address, right? But you can see who owns this building. And wow, $39 million. That is a fancy building. And you can look through all the property records and so on. So for residential addresses, you can find out, hold on one second. Let me go back to okay. You can find out who the landlord is, how many eviction cases they've filed, how many violations exist, what other landlords are connected to them, and so on. So let me just guess at an address here and see, let's see. Okay, so here's a very interesting example. 1385 Fulton Avenue in the Bronx. So you can see that this has 85 rent stabilized units before, and now it still has 85 rent stabilized units out of 85. It was built in 1998. And so how is it rent stabilized? Well, there's probably a tax subsidy of some kind. You can see who the landlords are. Rafal Marquardt and all these other people here. You can see when the building was last registered and whether the registration is still valid. You can see that there's 296 violations in this building. 52 of them are open, and so on. So it's a very, and then the other thing you can see is all the other buildings on this map, which are connected to the ownership of this building. So this is a pretty major landlord. They own a lot of buildings in Upper Manhattan and in the Bronx. You can see the timeline of the buildings and the complaints. You can see a list of all the buildings in kind of a chart. So it can be a very powerful tool to organize tenants, to mobilize them, to find out information if you're the actual tenant and maybe you already live there, or maybe you're researching a new building and you want to see what it's like before you sign a lease, or maybe you're helping someone, they come to seek your help and they want to learn more about how all of this works. That's another thing that you can do. So, any questions so far?
I don't see any hands raised, so you can continue.
Okay, so here are some other things that we can do with the data. We can make a list of the worst landlords based on violations. And every year we build this list, and this one's called Who's Trying to Evict Tenants During the COVID-19 Pandemic? And you can go to each one of these boxes and you can read more about these entities and see if your landlord is one of those. You can also see where they evict tenants on this map. And the data can be a very powerful tool to identify where to deliver resources, where people are most vulnerable, and so on. Some other things that we do. So you can order your rent history. So has anyone ever tried to order their rent history through DHCR if they lived in a rent stabilized apartment? There's only one way to do it. Actually, there's two ways. You can either go there in person and wait for hours, or you can write to them and send a form and then have it sent back to you. So we actually have a third way, which is you can text them and write your address, and then within a few days, your rent history is automatically mailed to you. Isn't that great? So all you have to do is write your address and phone number. It has to be for your apartment. You can't request somebody else's. But if you're the tenant, you just fill out this form, hit next, and within a few days, your rent history is mailed right back to you. So that tool is used thousands and thousands of times, and it's a very useful little trick to help people get their rent history very quickly. And then the next area in which we work is we provide a lot of know your rights information. So we have a guide to filing an HP action. We have know your rights about the heat law. We have fire safety tips, because as many of us know, there was a terrible fire in the Bronx a few years ago. 17 people died because the fire doors didn't work properly. And so people died of smoke inhalation, including young children. It was terribly, terribly sad. And it's something that could have been prevented. And we wanted to address that issue here. We have some other issues that we write about too. How do you deal with mold in your apartment? What if I want to get an air conditioner in the summer? Do I have a right to do that? Is my landlord overcharging me? Like, how do you know how to read an overcharge in a rent history? Can new buildings be rent stabilized? Yes, they can. And we just saw an example of that. A 1998 building, which is relatively new, can also be rent stabilized, and so on and so forth. So we have a library of things here that we call the Learning Center, and it guides tenants in many different ways. So that's our website. And here are some of our partners. So we work with many, if not all, the tenant groups and lawyers and nonprofits in this in this community in New York City. And we're always adding more people, and we're always interested in collaborating and hearing new ideas so we can do more with our team. We have 11 people on our team. Half the people are like software engineer types, so they build these things. And the other half, or the other set, are people who know a lot about housing law and housing policy, and people who've worked with tenants before. It's great to share this information with you. We would love to work with you again, and if there's other trainings we can do in more detail on any of these particular issues, we're happy to do that. So with that said, let me stop and open it up for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we can give Dan a few minutes to speak about his logistics, letter of complaints that he does, and then we'll just open it so they can either steer the questions to you and or Stan. So, can you unmute? You ready, Stan?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can y'all hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, well, my introduction to Just Fix was as a community organizer with the Justice for All Coalition a couple of years ago. And in dealing with NYCHA tenants in Queensbridge, Ravenswood, Astoria houses who had tremendous issues with repairs and could not get their repairs done. Me and them have submitted tickets, and the tickets go to the manager's office. Those tickets get closed, nothing happens. So my interest in Just Fix was a letter of complaint, which is actually a letter that goes, as Satish explained, a letter that actually goes to the manager's office, looks like a legal document, it's coming from the tenant, and that got most of these manager offices to really respond, and actually began to get the work done for residents, So during my time with Justice for All, I think I submitted maybe over 200 letters of complaint. And I would say a good maybe 30–40% of people actually got the work done. And I believe that that would not have happened without that particular tool, because these are folks who were not getting the work done before. So as a result of the letter of complaints, we was able to launch a lawsuit in Queensbridge houses. And the letter of complaints is actually the foundation of that lawsuit, with 10 residents who said, you know what, we're gonna do a collective HP action and take NYCHA to court. It has become and can become the basis of other lawsuits around the city. And it's just been an excellent tool, and a very empowering tool to our residents who've been able to use it and actually have their voices heard and make NYCHA pay attention. And we've been able to send those letters to the highest levels of NYCHA. Greg Russ, when he was the CEO, would get these letters of complaints. But so with the elected officials that represent the tenants in their particular district. So it became a political tool that we could use as well, to actually hold elected officials accountable to get the work done. So for me as an organizer, my work would not, it's Just Fix has been like maybe 50% or more of everything that I've done over the last few years, which is why I became a board member and then brought Sandrea on, so we continue to be involved and spread this message, not just to NYCHA residents, but really the residents all across the city, that they can have a voice and take some sort of action against a landlord at a time when lawyers are very rare and scarce. So it's an invaluable tool for residents to fight back. And I'm so happy to be a part of it and to share this with you guys. And want to make this known throughout the entire city of New York, because so many residents need this information. So I think I'll stop there. Anything else? I'll stop there.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you. You breathed right through. Okay, so we're gonna open it up for questions. Thank you both for your presentation, and Satish taking us on a tour and a demo. And as I said at the board of directors meeting, the website is very user friendly, which is good for anybody from young people to seasoned people. So you can maneuver through it easy. So that's a good thing. So a great presentation. We have a question from Rita Papa. She has a hand up.
I thank you very much for coming, and thank you for this presentation. We do have a housing committee, and I wish that this was a joint committee. But I have a question. Have you ever used a rent strike where people pay their rent in an escrow account until the repairs are done. Because you could ask for repairs for years, and that's really not fair. Heat in the winter is not negotiable. So have you ever used a rent strike? And if you have, what was the results? Thank you.
Sure, that's a really, really good question. In prior times, rent strikes were very common. Tenants would band together and collect the rent and hold it until the landlord met their demands. So sometimes it's the elevator's broken, the super is not doing their job, there are major problems in the building that need to be addressed. Landlords adapted to the issue of rent strikes and also got very creative in using information as to who held their rent and who they had to sue, and created tenant blacklists. So the tenant blacklist effectively killed rent strikes. They are no longer safe for many tenants because if you hold your rent, you will be sued for non-payment of rent, and then you go on a blacklist. Now in 2019, the HSTPA, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, basically tried to put a stop to these tenant blacklists and made it illegal for landlords to use these blacklists. But unfortunately, there's no guarantee that the law is working and that there still aren't these lists that landlords can collect and prevent a tenant from renting a future apartment. The other problem is that it's very difficult to manage a rent strike. When I've had a rent strike with my clients, I basically became a rent collector, and that's not what I wanted to do. And so if one tenant doesn't pay that month, then all the other tenants are put in jeopardy because they don't have all the rent in hand to hold over the landlord's head. And then finally, a rent strike is challenging because the landlord will file eviction cases. And if the tenants are not rent regulated, then they are subject to eviction at the end of their leases. So any tenant who participates in a rent strike and they're not protected by rent stabilization can effectively be evicted for no cause. And that's why many tenant advocates are pushing for good cause legislation. In Albany right now, it's actually on the table before the governor, or at least on the way right now. And good cause eviction legislation makes the landlord show a reason why they're evicting someone. They can't just evict someone at the end of their lease if they're not rent regulated. So all of these reasons make rent strikes much more difficult than they used to be. And they are just not as common because of all of these hurdles. Instead, we would encourage tenants to file HP cases as a group. So whether you live in NYCHA or you live in private housing, get together with your neighbors. You don't necessarily have to hold the rent, but you can all sue your landlord together. And that way, nobody's at risk of eviction. No one has to collect the rent and fill the role of the landlord, and you can still try to get those repairs made. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Satish, can I ask, what does HP stand for?
HP is Housing Part Action. So Housing Court is 50 years old this year. And the reason Housing Court was founded is to address repairs. Instead, over the last 50 years, Housing Court has become an eviction machine. It's been a place where landlords can very quickly file and win cases against tenants for eviction. But originally, the housing part was for repairs, and we still call them housing part actions, as it hints to that original purpose of Housing Court, which was for repairs. So an HP is just a case brought by a tenant against a landlord for repairs.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add, on December 13th of 2019, residents of Isaac Housing in Home Terrace, we did a group HP Action Housing Parts lawsuit against NYCHA. And we had options. We decided collectively, rent strike was one of them. But we opted for collectively to do the HP Action lawsuit. It felt right. It felt safer for, the masses of us. And it was about 30 plus residents that did file. So, and we did invite the housing committee, and Ed Hartsock is here, so we'd like to recognize him. So it's not actually a joint meeting, but we did invite them out to the meeting, and they're here. So just to, I don't know if Ed wants to say anything on behalf of his committee. I'm putting them on the spot. And any other questions, please raise your hand. There you go. Hi, want to say anything, Rita?
No, thanks, Sandra. Thanks. Hi, Rita. It's great to see Rita here. It's Satish, great presentation. What great work you're doing. Very informative.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Rita, you're right. I mean, this is really. We might have you come back, do 15, do a bit at our housing committee meeting, right, Rita? I mean, why not? It's good. It was good the first time. Why not the second time, right? And I mean, no, I mean that sincerely, because I'm a practicing attorney, and I will tell you, as a litigator, I mean, the idea of going into housing court, I'll go to traffic court. Housing court, oh my God, I get, gives me, I get chills at the idea of that. So I can only imagine. But it's a great presentation. I'm glad I came in. So I'm here, even though you don't see me.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me know. I can, connect you with them.
Yeah.
Get it done. And yeah, it could be twice. And hopefully they can tour community boards to get this.
Yeah, absolutely. Lord knows.
Yeah, as I spoke at our board meeting, that it's good to go around so people can know these tools are here for them, because it's very user friendly. So,
no question.
Thank you, Ed.
I'm still here.
I think I see another hand. Lakeisha, you can unmute Lakeisha. Then we'll go back to you, Rita. Lakeisha Taylor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I actually used JustFix to send my landlord a letter. And I think that was the first time in which they realized that I was not playing with them. And I used that letter to actually say that my manager was personally coming against me with her attack, saying that I was putting up flyers in my development. So, and it was the most simplest tool I've ever used. And I did not, again, like you're saying, these are things that I just did not even know I could do, and I was just so happy when I found out that I could do this, because I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need to go to court, and I just did it 1, 2, 3. And it really kind of put my management on notice, and I was just so grateful for this tool to actually help me, wake my management up to say, she's serious, she's not playing, enough is enough. This harassment needs to stop.
That's really great to hear. And we would love to talk with you further about your experience, if you're willing to share what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, so we can make it better. And so if you're willing to do that, I'd love to reach out to you.
Oh, sure.
I can put y'all in touch. Lakeisha's one of the co-founders. She's one of the co-founders of the Alzheimer's Coalition also, which we're going to have you all come out and do a presentation as well to our group, our residents of Isaac. So yeah, but I'll connect you both. I'll give you a direct. I'll do an email tonight. Thank you. Awesome. Good testimony, right? Okay. Miss Rita. Okay.
I have to clarify that when I first became interested in working for tenants, and I have worked with over 25 years, and I have a lot to be proud about in saving many apartments, is that what I'm hearing from you is one thing that comes right to my heart, that the one with the gold writes the rules, and the tenants are never the ones with the gold. It's always the landlord is the one with the gold. And as you said, there are fear of being blacklisted, so on and so forth. But what are landlords afraid of being? They can go out and they're never blacklisted. They're never blacklisted from buying more apartments, getting more apartments, whatever it is. That's where the social injustice comes in, is that it is never even between a level field between tenants and landlords. The people I'm going to use NYCHA as an example, who didn't have, in certain developments, that they didn't have hot water for months, which is winter months. And yet, if the landlord didn't get his money, I'm a big fan of the rent strikers. If he didn't get his money, and there was this whole mass, it has to be 100%. 100%. The first time I heard about this was Concourse Village in the Bronx. 100%. And let me tell you, that landlord sat up and did something about it. But we still have that feeling, we as tenants, that, oh, what they will do to us, that's where the social injustice comes. And I know that you're working toward eliminating it. And I'm sorry to hear it's still around. So when do the tenants, then I'm not talking about one tenant who doesn't like the color of the paint of her house. You understand what I'm talking? I'm talking about when an entire building of 17 floors and thousands of people don't have hot water for 8 months, and those are winter months. We are not talking about some little thing now. We are talking about the health and the welfare. So I hope that you work toward leveling the playing field. It's not easy. Money is the unleveler. So that's why I asked about rent strike, because where do we give the power to the people?
You're absolutely right. And one of our goals is to use technology to level that playing field. This is a time unlike any other in which the average person can access unlimited amounts of information and connect with a huge number of people. And so they have money, but we have numbers and we have the information. So that's the goal of Just Fix. One thing that I say often kind of in jest is landlords are so powerful in New York that a mediocre nobody from Queens became the president of the United States. That's a joke, but sadly it's true. So that's what we're up against. And I fully understand what you're saying is housing is a commodity. It's something that people make profit over. And the incentive to profit is an extremely powerful one. And so it's difficult to overcome. Now, one of the tragedies about our system is even not-for-profit housing like NYCHA is still in bad shape. So there's no excuse for that. We can set aside all of the speculators and the greedy corporations, but how do you explain NYCHA? Why is NYCHA in disrepair? And that's something that we should work on, setting aside the issue of whether you're for the market in housing or not. There's no reason why NYCHA should be in bad shape. There's no reason why NYCHA tenants should be suffering, and we can do better. I think Sarah has a question.
Wait, she's a co-chair, so she's open. The mic is open. I don't have to call on you.
Thank you. So, Keish, first of all, thank you for your work with the Legal Aid Society. Public defense and public legal services are critical and essential services for the people of New York. And I don't know where folks would be without it. So, so thank you for that work. And I'm so impressed with the user experience work that JustFix has done to make to understand the need to put this interface on mobile phones, and just thinking through the ease of sending these complaint letters, and then to hear what Stan said about how he was able to use JustFix to organize and take collective action against their landlord. So I imagine that there's a lot of really important information that you're able to collect through this process. And just putting on my public policy hat, are there, or just policy advocacy interests, will JustFix be able to use the information that you're gathering to produce reports that offer city council information or housing agencies in the city information about how well they're doing, or how quickly landlords are or are not responding to repair requests, and the types of repairs. So, for example, are certain landlords really bad at dealing with heat, or are they, and you have all of the maps, the geolocation interfaces, and can we map out, which boroughs or which neighborhoods are particularly underserved by their landlords. That kind of information could be really helpful to kind of bring the issue specific, location specific information to elected officials, to hopefully encourage them to support better housing laws at least at the city council level, if not also at the state level.
That's such a great point. And I am currently meeting with as many city council members as possible to show them what we can do with this type of data, to show them what their districts look like, to show them how many tenants are suffering from lack of repairs in their districts, to show them who the bad actors are so they are aware of them, and to also seek funding. Because one of the things that's really interesting about JustFix is that we can tell who's using, we can't tell who's using it, but we can tell where they're sitting, like what computers they're using. And one of the biggest users comes from the city government. So people inside the city are huge users of JustFix. And that's ironic because they're looking at their own data from our site. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow into what you're talking about. detailed maps, understanding trends, identifying problems, and targeting solutions. One of the things that I'm really keen on doing is adding public health data to our data set. And so, for example, if you could see emergency room visits from public hospitals, I don't think we can get to private hospitals. But let's say we got Department of Health and hospitals to give us emergency room data from hundreds of public hospitals, right? And we could link emergency room visits for asthma with mold. How powerful would that be to get the city to target bad landlords who have mold in their buildings? Like, we could literally be saving children's lives, or at least changing the trajectory of their lives, because the average kid who has asthma misses weeks of school every year, and they can never get that back. And so I fully support what you're saying, and it's exactly the type of thing that we want to do going forward, to connect these dots, to make the data kind of sing and tell the story of what's happening to people, and to draw the attention of elected officials so they can act.
Thank you. That sounds amazing. And we hear so much about data being used to criminalize people and to surveil people. And I'm often hard pressed to name a way that technology is being used for liberative purposes and to support the vulnerable in our communities. And so I'm excited to have an example now with JustFix.
All right. Any more questions? Well, we have them here, because if not, y'all know what's gonna happen. Any more questions? Any more comments? Anyone? I'm looking for any raised hands. If not, we'll hear some final words from our presenters, since there's no hands. But yeah, so
Well, thank you very much. And please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, any issues, any ideas for us, I'm always happy to connect.
okay. You can drop your, I don't know if you did yet, but you can drop the contact info in the chat, and Robert will put it out, because it goes straight to the board, so he'll put it out to the masses. And you could do the same, Stan, if you.
Okay.
Final words from you, Stan?
Say again?
Any final words from you?
Yeah, I just want to say it's been such a great experience being on the board of JustFix. And it's really a great pleasure when you see somebody who feels hopeless, couldn't get the repairs done, sent in tickets and all the rest of that. And then we're able to come and actually give them a way to fight back and actually get repairs done. So to be a part of that, it's been very rewarding. And I think that every tenant, whether you're in NYCHA or any tenant in the city, should have this tool to fight back. I think it's incredible, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. I think it's phenomenal.
Okay, thank you. And I'm excited to be on the board, executive board for the directors of JustFix. So I'm looking forward to doing great work, continuing the work I'm already doing, but it's going to enhance throughout the city. And we're going to go statewide to countrywide, because it's so needed, housing justice. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on to the social justice committee meeting, is because this is about social justice, housing, and it's a way for people to be able to fight back, to advocate for their own selves, to feel empowered, as you said. So this is a great tool, a great resource. And then I'm gonna go to Rita. I see she has her hand up, and Rita.
Just wanted to say thank you. And can I make a motion to adjourn?
Well, we gotta do our own.
We have more? Right, but
Not there yet, but we're almost there.
but thank you. Of course, I just followed the agenda.
Yeah. Thank you.
Should I
do we
sign
have-
off now for your other business?
No. We about to wrap up. It's okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's up to you. But thanks again. We appreciate you all coming out. Just fixing. Y'all will eventually be coming to the housing committee meeting, and you'll come to the Homes Rising Coalition, one of our meetings, and hopefully we can have your all tour. We can tour, you can tour the community boards. Like I said, it's so needed. Thumbs up from some of the members, one of our public members, and everybody's excited. So this was great. And we're getting out early. So any old business? I'm going to put you on the spot, Sarah. Any new business? Can you bring up our March meeting? Can you talk about that real quick? Just announce it if you want. Are you ready for that?
Oh,
If not,
yeah. So super quickly, at our March meeting, we're going to have Damien Fagan he's the Chief Equity Officer of the Office of Cannabis Management. And so he's going to talk about the justice reinvestment work that he's doing as a part of the cannabis legalization law that was passed in New York State.
awesome. All right, thank you. So, motion to close. Can I get a second? I know Rita had already said it, but okay, Ed, and of course we're gonna give it to you, Rita. All right, thank you all. Good night. Thanks.